Welcome to the MultiCultural MindSet broadcast. Your host is Dr. LaVerne Hanes Collins, a licensed professional counselor, award-winning trainer, and keynote speaker. Dr. Collins is the author of Overlooked: Counselor Insights for the Unspoken Issues in Black American Life. Dr. Collins has also been a featured monthly columnist in the American Counseling Association's Counseling Today magazine with her Honoring Diversity column. Now, here's Dr. Collins.
Welcome back to the Multicultural Mindset, where we don't just skim the surface of mental health and culture. We go deep. We name the things that often go unspoken, and we lean into complexities with honesty, compassion, and purpose. I'm your host, Dr. LaVerne Hanes Collins. And before I dive into today's topic, I need to tell you that you need to watch this podcast to the end today because I have an exciting announcement. So hang in there so you don't miss it. Now, today, we're diving into something I call the vision problem in racial justice conversations. Now, before you picture eye charts and optometrists, let me explain. This is about how we see or fail to see when we talk about race, bias, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the world around us. I like to think of it in two categories: multicultural nearsightedness and multicultural farsightedness. And if you've never heard those terms before, stick with me. By the end of this episode, you'll not only know exactly what I mean, you'll probably start seeing these vision problems everywhere you look. This is about what our vision, or lack thereof, costs the people who are forced to live on the margins. So let's get into it. I want to start by asking you this. Have you ever tried to explain racism or systemic inequality to someone whose response was, well, I just don't see it? Or worse, I don't think it's that bad anymore. Yeah, that right there is multicultural nearsightedness in action. So, what is multicultural nearsightedness? In eye health, nearsightedness means you can see things up close, but you struggle with what's far away. So multicultural nearsightedness works the same way, except instead of distance, it's about scope. People with this condition are often laser focused on small individual acts of racism or bias they can see right in front of them. And maybe it's an offensive comment in a meeting. Maybe it's a viral video of someone calling the police on a Black man for simply existing. Or maybe it's an unfair workplace policy that everybody's whispering about. But when you ask them about systemic issues, the deeply rooted policies, the historical patterns, and the institutional structures that created those individual acts, and suddenly their clarity fades. They'll say, oh, well, that's too big, or, well, that's in the past, or let's not overcomplicate things. And without realizing it, they're reducing centuries of oppression to a few bad apples that they can name and shame. You see, multicultural nearsightedness is the inability, or sometimes the refusal, to see beyond what is immediately visible, or in the inability to see what is, shall we say, personally inconvenient. It's when someone only recognizes racism when it comes in the form of a viral video or an explicit racial slur or some public scandal. It's when diversity work becomes a photo op, so to speak, when inclusion becomes a hashtag, when people of color are invited to the table, but only during Black History Month or Hispanic Heritage Month. People with multicultural nearsightedness tend to focus on the symptoms of racism, but not the systems that create and maintain it. They respond to the obvious crisis, but ignore that slow burning fire of inequality that's been smoldering for centuries. And because they can't or won't see what's beneath the surface, they often deny the lived realities of people of color. They often mislabel our pain as overreaction or disengage once the news cycle shifts. It's a condition that keeps us in this cycle of temporary outrage, but permanent inaction. It's like seeing the tree, but not the forest, noticing the microaggression, but not the centuries old soil it grew from. And if you've ever felt gaslit when trying to explain your experience, if you've ever been told to, just move on, or keep it positive, or, well, don't make it about race, then you have felt the sting of someone else's nearsightedness. Think of it this way. Once there was a diversity workshop that broke into small groups to talk about this high-profile police shooting. And this one group got stuck debating whether the victim complied with police orders. And I mean, they dissected that video frame by frame, like referees watching an instant replay. But what they didn't discuss at all was the racialized policing history in that city. They didn't discuss the economic disparities. They didn't discuss that community's long-standing distrust of law enforcement. They could see the incident clearly, but the broader context, completely out of focus. That's multicultural nearsightedness. So let's talk about the other side of the spectrum, multicultural farsightedness. This is when someone becomes fixated on abstract ideals like unity or peace or colorblindness, while ignoring the urgent, concrete issues happening right in front of them. This happens when people are great at seeing the big picture. Like they can give TED Talk level explanations of systemic racism and the legacy of slavery and redlining and mass incarceration. They can talk about generational poverty. They've read the books, they've attended the webinars, they've shared the little infographic, pictures and stuff. But when it comes to seeing the small, daily interpersonal acts of bias right in front of them, they miss it. Or worse, they excuse it. They'll say, well, that's not worth bringing up. Or, we really have bigger fish to fry. It's when people say things like, we're all human. Let's focus on what unites us. I believe in equality for everyone. Or they'll say something like, talking about race is what keeps us divided. Sound familiar? Multicultural farsightedness loves to leap to the future, but it refuses to sit with the discomfort of the present. Now, people who hold this worldview, they often mean well, but their vision is distorted. They see the destination, but skip the journey. They want healing without truth. They want reconciliation without reckoning, unity without justice. And here's the danger. Farsightedness becomes a form of bypassing. It silences the grief. It dismisses the pain. It discourages the urgent action that justice requires. Man, it's not enough to believe in a better future. We got to confront the brutal realities that make the future seem impossible for too many people. What happens, for instance, when a clinical supervisor leads a training filled with DEI buzzwords? We're committed to equity and belonging, and we stand against all form of oppression for our clients. Beautiful words. But when an employee of color raised concerns about being excluded, say, from team decisions, that same leader says, well, maybe you're being too sensitive. They had perfect vision for this big picture, but blurriness in the lived present day experience of bias in their own office. That's multicultural farsightedness. Or take, for instance, a therapist working with a Black male client who presents with irritability, trouble sleeping, feelings of hopelessness. The therapist zeroes in on the insomnia, suggesting a sleep hygiene routine, cutting caffeine, maybe even doing some mindfulness apps, but they miss the larger racialized stress that this client endures daily. Constant police stops in his neighborhood, being overlooked for promotions, the emotional toll of watching racial violence on the news. The clinician saw the symptom, but didn't connect it to the systemic reality feeding it. That was nearsightedness. Here's an example of counselor farsightedness. This counselor has done all the cultural competence trainings. They've read the books, they attend the conferences, and they can speak so eloquently about the intersection of race and trauma. But in session, when a Latina client hesitates to share her struggles at work due to fear of being labeled as emotional or angry, that counselor responds with, well, you really need to advocate for yourself. Speak your truth. They see that big vision, that grand vision for social justice, but they miss her immediate reality that advocating in her specific workplace could carry real risks for her, given the bias that she faces. Then we have administrative things that come up too. In a leadership meeting, an agency director announces a new DEI initiative, and they're all excited about it. And they're going to collect demographic data, and they're going to host an annual bias training, and they're going to publish an equity statement, and everybody's applauding and they're happy. But when a frontline counselor points out that the intake form still forces multiracial clients to pick only one race category, or they bring up that bilingual therapists are overloaded and not getting extra pay, the director says, yeah, we'll address those details later. Those details are the lived experience of equity. Farsighted vision sweeps or sees the sweeping change, but misses the small daily inequities that make change really meaningful to the people involved. So there's a cost for blurred vision. If we can't sharpen our vision, we'll keep stumbling. We'll keep repeating the same cycles of misunderstanding and unfulfilled promises. In both of these conditions, multicultural nearsightedness and multicultural farsightedness, lead to blind spots. If you're nearsighted, you risk minimizing systemic issues and treating racism like a series of just one-off events instead of the interconnected web that it is. If you're farsighted, you risk overlooking the daily indignities and interpersonal biases that give systemic racism its staying power. And here's the kicker. People can switch back and forth between the two, depending on the topic. You might be farsighted about policing, but nearsighted about education, or nearsighted about workplace bias, but farsighted about voting rights. So whether it's nearsightedness or farsightedness, the result is the same. People of color are unseen, they're unheard, they're unprotected. And the work of racial justice gets reduced to a moment when it was always meant to be a movement. Let me give you an image. Imagine someone wearing eyeglasses, with the wrong prescription. They can kind of see. They squint, they tilt their head. Maybe they guess their way forward, but they miss details. They misread signs. They overlook what's right in front of them, and sometimes they crash. Now think about our society. How many institutions, educational, medical, legal, religious, are crashing into the lives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Crashing because they're operating with the wrong prescription, because their vision is blurred by bias, blurred by denial, by fear, or by the privilege of looking away. We cannot afford this anymore. We're living in a time when racial injustice is no longer hiding in the shadows. It is bold. It is violent. It is embedded in policy and in practice. And it is sustained in part by people who choose not to see it clearly. Let's talk about seeing clearly. What does it mean to see with clarity, with integrity? Well, that's the whole goal. The goal is what I call multicultural clarity, the ability to see both the small acts and the big systems, and to understand how they feed each other. It means developing the discipline to zoom in and zoom out, to ask yourself, how does this one moment connect to a bigger story? Hear me. How does the bigger story show up in this moment? It also means being willing to have your own blind spots pointed out without you becoming defensive, because we all have blind spots. It means holding both the truth of now and the hope for what could be. It means acknowledging the pain without trying to rush past it. It means choosing not to look away even when you could. It means listening to the voices of people who've been silenced for generations and believing them the first time. It means doing your own work, unlearning, relearning, and continuing the discomfort that comes with growth. And it means acting not just when it's convenient or popular or safe for you, but acting, taking action because it's the right thing to do. Multicultural clarity is that kind of vision that heals, that liberates, that rebuilds. And this matters more than one might imagine for people of color in the United States. For people of color, these vision problems are not abstract, they are lived reality. When white colleagues or leaders are nearsighted, we get token gestures without systemic change. When colleagues and leaders are farsighted, We get speeches about equity without protection in daily interactions. And honestly, sometimes we ourselves develop these vision problems. Survival in a biased system can make you tune out one level of the problem just to keep functioning. That's why this work is lifelong for all of us. So, if you're someone who's just now realizing that your vision might be off, don't panic. That's awareness. That's where transformation starts. It's where it begins. Check your lens, recalibrate your focus. Ask yourself, have I trained myself to hold both truths at once? Or am I only reacting to what's right in front of me? Or am I avoiding the hard truths in front of me in favor of soft ideals? And in either case, who's paying the price for my blind spots? Because clarity isn't just about what you see, it's about what you're willing to see. Let me give you an analogy from my own life. I have what I call late middle-aged eyes. Late middle age. That means my 2020 vision took, I guess, an early retirement, somewhere around age 40 or 50. My distance vision is still working, but put some fine print in my hands up close, ask me to read it, that's a whole nother matter. So my optometrist did this really cool thing. She changed my brain. Yeah, my optometrist changed my brain. She set me up with a reading strength contact lens for my right eye to support close-up work, near vision. And I use my left eye with no contact lens at all for distance vision. Now they call it monovision, which means each eye is used for a different depth of focus. Now, my optometrist explained to me that the single lens would teach my brain to adapt to a whole new way of seeing. Get that? That single lens would teach my brain to adapt to a whole new way of seeing, creating balanced vision. I can see up close and I can see distance without having those progressive lineless trifocals, bifocals. We need that kind of balanced vision. And I present to you that true cultural humility and multicultural awareness requires both distance vision for the big picture and clarity for what's up close right now. We've got to be able to confront and name the injustices that people of color have faced in the past, and we have to be willing to admit and address the inequities people of color face today. Otherwise, a counselor risks doing further harm, and that is absolutely unethical. So we need a new way of seeing the people in our practice communities. We have to see the whole picture. One eye set on distance and the other eye set on the present. And when we see the whole picture, we can see the whole person. I really appreciate you tuning in today, so thank you. Now, before I close, I want to share what I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, something I'm really excited about. I've just launched a brand new digital publication on medium.com called The Multicultural Lens. It's a space where I'll be writing deeper reflections on culture and healing and justice and liberation for the general public through a decolonized, truth-centered lens. So many people don't know what to believe right now. They hear so much. They're not really sure what's real and what's not. So if today's conversation stirred something in you, and if you want to keep sharpening your vision, I invite you to follow me there and invite members of your practice community and even your supervisors and supervisees, your colleagues in the field. Follow me there. Again, it's called the multicultural lens. If you've ever wished you had a place to read thoughtful, challenging, and hopeful perspectives on the multicultural journey that we're all a part of, this is the place. The first article launched is a version of this conversation on multicultural nearsightedness and multicultural farsightedness. You can search for the multicultural lens on medium.com and subscribe, like, comment. I'm going to drop the link in the show notes at the end of the podcast so you can find it easily. And until next time, keep seeing with your whole vision, near and far. And please keep practicing with empathy, cultural humility, and a multicultural mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.